Hey, it's Cam with the West Central Montana Avalanche Center. We're in the Southern Bitterroot today on a northwest aspect at 7,800 feet. So if we take away any wind transport, there is about 8 inches of new snow. Areas exposed to the wind during the storm have a slab about 12 to 14 inches thick. Below that crust is really dependent on how exposed that particular slope got to the sun and the high temperatures in the mid 50s at upper elevation that we saw last weekend. South aspects, a lot of those areas, that near surface facets, that buried surface ore was saturated with water and really destroyed. However, now there's a really good bed surface on those south aspects, west aspects for avalanches to run on. As we move around to the compass onto north facing slopes, we start to break down that crust. Some areas, we're getting a thin breakable crust, and then as we move to true north aspects, that crust goes away. This particular slope, we've got about a 1 centimeter breakable crust, but directly below it, we have some very small, very fine faceted snow. When we do our stability tests, we're able to get propagation to go partway across the column directly below that crust. Suspect if we had more snow, more of a slab above that layer, it would allow for a little bit more propagation. So what does that mean moving through this week? Well, the primary concern is going to be areas where the wind has blown that snow into slabs 12 to 24 inches thick. Those aren't necessarily true wind slabs in that in most places they do sit on some degree of a persistent weak layer. So with a classic wind slab, you really expect your sensitivity to drop off pretty quick. Where these are more going to be a shallow drop off of reactivity sensitivity just because of what is sitting below them. As you're traveling around, one classic mistake, especially with buried surface ore, is that it often gets destroyed high in the start zones but preserved lower on the slope. And you might ski partway down the slope, trigger an avalanche mid-slope, maybe on a convexity or a sheltered area where that surface ore was preserved. So just make sure you're not just assessing what you're seeing up high, assess what you see on the slope top to bottom. Other than that, there is a high degree of spatial variability with these problems right now. And just because you ski slope A, if you move to slope B later in the day, you still need to do a good slope assessment on slope B. The forecast is an average of conditions, and always remember that you might be a little higher than the average, a little bit lower than the average, and these forecasts cover a big zone. So really, especially with when you have problems that have high degrees of spatial variability, make sure you're taking the time to assess that particular slope you're planning to ski or ride, and just make sure that you're not higher or lower than the average that the forecast covers. So with that, let us know what you're seeing and ski and ride safe.